I'm gonna call the Springfield City Council work session to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Counselor Weber. Here. Counselor Mo, Counselor Rodley. Here. Counselor Blackwell. And Counselor Stout.
Here, thank you.
Counselor Blackwell is excused for the evening. We're expecting Counselor Mo any minute. We have 3 items on the work session today. The first item is evaluate Ward 5 applications with Mary Bridget.
Process. And the purpose of the work session tonight would be to evaluate the applications that you have, decide if you want the applications to move forward to an interview and deliberation, which is currently scheduled for October 20th. So the council received one application. You can direct me and staff to put this on for the October 20th city council meeting for an interview. The interview questions that we're going to include in the packet were the same as last time. There are 7 of them. Each counselor would ask a question. They're questions like, what do you like best about Springfield? You know, the concept of being elected citywide, but representing a ward. If there are things you could change about Springfield. Also understanding between, you know, council, city manager, and staff. And then if the applicant had any questions for you. So the plan was just to continue on like we've done before. And if there's any discussion or questions that you have now, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so I think we're good to schedule Andrew Buck for, what did you say, the 20th?
I believe it's the 20th. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and let him know.
Okay.
We're cruising right along. Don't worry that this conversation is going to be a little bit longer. City Hall deferred maintenance.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you. Mike Espinoza and I are here to brief you on the City Hall deferred maintenance and department consolidation project, or I should say potential project, because we're at a point where we need council direction to move forward with anything, and I think that'll become apparent in the material provided in the presentation. The presentation will summarize where we stand today, what's driving the need for action, and then the choices before and the direction we're seeking from council. So we're really looking to try and present something to you, the needs that we have to ensure that council or that City Hall remains safe, efficient, and sustainable civic center for decades to come. Oh, there it goes. Perfect. So, as you see in the materials, City Hall is facing some critical deferred maintenance and safety challenges. We had done an internal OSHA audit this last summer in prep for a potential inspection by OSHA, and there were several code deficiencies and other safety issues that were identified. And as outlined, some of those, the remedy to some of those is through, you know, remodel or upgrades to City Hall. So those are critical. The other thing that became apparent was the HVAC system through the summer, and Mike will be providing more information on some of that and some of the other work on the building. But what's become apparent is really we're at a point now where the entire HVAC system controls and everything need to be replaced, ductwork and all of that to continue to have City Hall function. We started off kind of where we started originally about a year ago was, you know, what we had council approve was really a functional remodel, you know, looking at redoing some carpet, paint, lighting, some of those kinds of things, and some functional remodel around the services we provide and for those departments. And then through this investigation, this is where we've kind of landed on this project. So a little bit of the background. So City Hall was originally built as a mall in 1972. I don't know how many years it functioned, not very many. The city purchased it in 1980 to use as City Hall, and so it was remodeled at that time for City Hall. So again, you think about this space and how it's divided up and what it was originally designed for and what the original HVAC system that we're currently operating with, same ductwork, everything from most of the areas, 40 plus years, was designed as a mall, not necessarily as office space to be kind of sectioned up and cordoned off. In 2007, the roof was replaced, the roof membrane. And then in 2015 and 18, we did some seismic evaluation and some seismic upgrades. There are still other seismic upgrades, but we got to some of the most critical seismic upgrades to make sure that, to ensure that City Hall is safe to occupy. And what that means is the upgrades we did do really ensure that people get out of the building in the event that that Cascadia size event happens, but most likely we won't be able to reoccupy the building. That would just be where there's not really a way to design the building to come back and do that without spending multi-million dollars. And then in 2016, 2019, the HVAC system was identified to be replaced at that point in time. At that point in time, I think it was just under a $2 million project. And then in 2020, council considered replacing the HVAC system and the roof as part of the ARPA funds. It wasn't one of the projects selected, but at that point in time, we were looking at probably a little bit more complex system, and then also trying to do the HVAC system as a standalone project within the building, and we were looking at a $7 to $9 million tag at that time. So I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about what's going on with the HVAC system, and there you have a nice picture of what our fiberboard ductwork looks like.
Thanks, Jeff. So good afternoon. This is probably my first time meeting you guys. So again, Mike Espinoza, City Facilities Supervisor. I'm in my third year, so I've kind of learned my way through this, but so I appreciate the time. So yeah, like Jeff was saying, we have 64 units. Do you want to go back one slide,
Yeah.
if possible? And so if you look at this picture in front of you, right? So this is where we identify how big the roof and how big of scope this is, right? This is not a multi-level building, so the top is really kind of expansive. And so 64 units on there. We have 10 units that are fully operational that we can trust, that I can tell you guys it's going to work, for the next 10 plus years. And then the rest, let me get my notes here. We have about 36 that we salvaged, which what means is the X's, the red X's that you guys see in the screen there, we use those as salvageable parts. So if one's compressor went out and the other one, a fan went out, so we figured out which parts we needed to then get those 36 units back and running, right? So out of 64, we have like about 46 units that are working now. And we have 18, as you can see on the screen, they're completely broken. And so one thing that I wanted to say is, we're to the point where I don't want to make you guys feel like we're cornering you guys into having to do this, but it is a compounding issue that we have in front of us. I can't go and just replace the HVAC units without having to replace the electrical. So there is service shutoffs on each unit, so you can service them. They're out of code now, meaning if I replace one, I have to find a way to get it up to code. So on each one, you figure anywhere from $17,000 to $20,000 per unit. And that's just saying that to replace them. Then we have the roof that would be the next step. You're not going to replace all these units without damaging the roof. The next thing that comes to mind would be if we replace the units, the ducting, like Jeff said, is pretty antiquated to the point where, it's fiberboard. If you guys have been around buildings long enough, when I first started, didn't even know that this was a realistic way that they duct things. I thought it was all sheet metal. So when we find our way into replacing new units, like Jeff mentioned earlier, this was a shopping mall. It was an open, expansed area without any segmented like offices, different types of usage for the building. So we go and replace the units, and the next thing that's going to happen is the ducting is either leaking, isn't sufficient enough to provide enough flow to certain buildings, and what happens is they'll fight each other. So we have two units are too close, because the intake and the exhaust, or where you get your heat and cool, they're fighting each other. So these units, we replace them, instead of 30 years, we get 15, 20 years plus, I mean, the most, because they keep fighting each other. So, and then with that, like I said before, we have these on a daisy change, kind of like your Christmas trees, right? One light goes out, the whole string of lights go out. That's how we have it as an operating system on Windows 7. And we can't update Windows 7 because Train won't allow us to do it. So we would have to get it's about $100,000 to just get control back of our system, which right now is working at times. So sometimes you'll come in here like today, feel a little chilly. Well, that's because we physically have to tell each HVAC unit to either heat or cool. That's how behind we are. So with this, with this fix, we would also kind of go in and take care of the HVAC system. So, like I said earlier, it's not just a simple fix where we can replace some units. That would have been the easy thing. It's just you have to do one thing and it kind of falls to the other. If we do ducting now with the new state, and I think it's federal law, we can't put fluorescent lights back up. So, we're all thinking with Jeff is, we're kind of just faced with like problem after problem. We just keep, lifting that rock and finding more problems. So that's kind of a little overview of the big issue that we have just with the HVAC system.
So yeah, so where we're at, the current status started out, like I said, as kind of just a limited functional remodel to do some aesthetics, remodel, reorganize our airspaces, get a little bit more efficient. And then as we dug deeper into the building conditions, it's just kind of become clear that a remodel, if that simple of a remodel, won't really address the deeper issues to keep City Hall functioning, the building functioning, by not addressing these aging systems and these code deficiencies. So what we're presenting to you is the need to kind of evolve this project into a more comprehensive modernization plan that will replace the HVAC, roof, electrical, plumbing, complete the security upgrades, fix wayfinding. There's a host of, that host of things that we would be addressing. And then the other thing is, as part of that, which is what we were looking at, is consolidating our department services. One of those ideas is that we'd go down to one customer service counter. So, reshuffling where services are presented instead of having 2-3 different counters throughout City Hall. And so really the goal is to, look at City Hall and what work does this building need to make it an effective, safe civic center for the next generation, 25 to 30 years. And so kind of here's the comparison. So I think within the materials, and I'll let Mike speak to it, you'll have what he presented to ET that kind of got us looking deeper, which is the laundry list of projects and work that's needed at City Hall that makes that is that total of 31.3 million if we were to do them as individual one-off projects, and kind of comparing that to where we've landed, at least with the presentation we have today on the project needs. And so what you can see is with this project, with working with our architect consultant, we think we can get that list of work done for less than $12 million. With that savings, you see there's this annual savings potentially with new HVAC energy efficiency. A lot of that is built in the fact that Mike's staff spends 60% of their time just keeping the HVAC system running in this building. So, he can speak to what that means they're not getting to annually, because that taking away that they're not getting to some of the work at some of the fire stations. You see our stairs out here. We also know that the elevators need to be upgraded. So there's a lot of other things that they're not getting to because they spend so much time just keeping this system operating to keep City Hall open. Yes, sir. Anytime to ask questions.
Hey, you're not, Steve, your microphone's on mute. Microphone's on mute.
Don't need a microphone either. I understand this can be financed, this installation.
Yeah, so at part of that, at the end, we have kind of a couple ideas working with finance on ideas to finance the project.
And the reason I don't have the agenda because my computers aren't working. So I'm working blind. I don't even turn on the microphone. The other question is, apparently this existing system is 25 years old.
The existing HVAC system. So the ductwork, most of the ductwork is 40+ years old. There have been HVAC units that have been replaced.
Yeah.
One of the things, as Mike mentioned, we've heard that, can't we just replace the air handling units? Well, that's when we look at how we've remodeled City Hall over time and cordoned off space and made smaller space. That's where he's talking about we have units that just keep fighting themselves. And so then they're burning out well within their, useful life. And so we're really at that place that the HVAC system needs to be wholesale replaced to for the building use that it is today instead of an open mall.
Yeah, and then I'll just speak a little more further into what Jeff was talking about. We look at the number, the HVAC saves, 229,000, and that's in already budgeted labor, right? And so my staff of 2, I have 3, I have staff of 3. One is he is stationed over at the Justice Center full time. So I really only have 2 guys with incredible skills. They're always in the background keeping us going without us even seeing. This summer alone, we were saying about 60% of their time. And we still have to run all the fire stations. I still have to do ops, Main Street buildings. It is very difficult for my guys. And so we have to, we get really creative on how to make things work. But what that does is actually frees us up. Like Jeff was commenting earlier, I in my funding, the way I'm funded out of, 420, I don't have enough in there to do anything above 6 figures, right? Even past $200,000 a year. So when something comes up like the stairs, I have to push that to the side and kind of devote my time just solely into the HVAC system, or we're done with the HVAC system. And then I go to the fire stations because those are 24-hour, places that I have to keep, them going. We're talking gates, HVAC there as well. So it frees up us a little bit. We talk about, what happened in the past. I'm not sure. I've only been here 3 years. But it does lead us we are not actually managing and we're not operating the system and servicing the systems. We're just reacting to it. So this kind of gives me a leg up where this catches up, frees me to catch up the other buildings like the fire stations. And I've always said, to the directors and other folks that, living here in the city, our facilities, our infrastructure is the pinnacles of the city. You drive around town, you see a nice fire station, you see a nice city hall, and that gives you a good feeling as a taxpayer, let you know that's where my money's going from. So for me, that's why I have to balance is I have so much dedicated time here to as well keeping the, fire staff, the police stations going. So that's kind of what it kind of frees me up to do is kind of start kind of reaching out a little further.
So go back to the funding portion for a moment. The fund you need, what's 420?
So 420 is a building preservation fund. So if Nate here can explain it a little better, but basically that would be like my operating budget. And I get about 200 and some change a year to address the entire city.
So the $230,000 you're talking about from a savings perspective, like, is it fair to describe 2 things happening here? One of them is that essentially all our building maintenance money a year is effectively going into this building to keep the HVAC running, or 60% of it. Is that?
I wouldn't say the entire budget. So we basically we've been, like I said, my guys is their skill set is that they can take little amount of money and make something great happen. With the savings that we're doing, it just frees us up to reach further out to other stations. So if we take the money, it's not like we're actually saving that money. It's just allowing us to be more diverse in what we do.
So the way that I would think about it would be that $250,000 that you're saving is essentially $250,000 of other deferred maintenance that we're paying down annually because you've actually got people out there doing that work.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to offer a little bit of more detailed information because I want to acknowledge the great work of Jeff and his team in helping us really come to some clarity on what's needed with City Hall. And I don't want to, cast any judgment on the past, because I think in the other councils, other city managers had discussions about whether or not we would continue to have this building as our City Hall. So that's fair. But I think, my approach is, kind of the fiscal reality of the city is trying to make do with what we have. And because knowing that building a new building would be largely unaffordable for the city at this point. So how can we take what we have and make the best use of it? And when we were talking about all of these units, in my mind, it didn't make sense to try to replicate what was already on City Hall and improve that, because it wasn't designed for what we're doing now. So Jeff really took this project on, looked at how we can use our space more efficiently, and hopefully I think that also made a difference in the final price tag, because we weren't putting as many units up there. We weren't replicating what's existing. Instead, we were looking at how can we allocate the space more efficiently, because when you look around City Hall, there's a lot of wasted space here. It wasn't built to be a City Hall. And that's okay. Sometimes we use that space for community functions, so we make it work, but it doesn't work in the operational side of things. So when we talk about words like remodel, I get a little bit hinky about that word, because we're talking about really replacing carpet that's been here for, 40 years probably, and, boxes that are stacked up high where, staff aren't really getting good light and ventilation. To me, this is like more of a livability issue with our employees, and that was reflected in we did a kind of a preliminary walkthrough as if OSHA were inspecting us, knowing that OSHA had come through and hit some of our partners. What is our liability on that? And we really identified some deficiencies there. So we're trying to correct those deficiencies where bringing the building up to a habitable standard, I don't think is too much of a over explanation. So I would look forward to getting to the financing part of it.
Okay. So yeah, as Nancy said, when we look at it, the final plans that Mike and I looked at for this estimate that came part of this package, as she said, is 23 units from 64. So a little bit more efficient system, a little bit better modern system. So as we consider the financing options and what we were looking at, we're really highlighting the fact of the safety, the fiscal responsibility, workplace needs of our staff, as Nancy said. And so when we looked at the financing, and Nathan's here to, speak a little bit more to this. So this is me kind of echoing a conversation I had with Nathan, but we have a rainy day reserve that has $6+ million, I believe, available. So with that and looking at other funds and how to divvy this up, we feel we could cover the cost of this project and minimize borrowing and reduce reserve flexibility. The other option is financing the project for how many ever years, getting a loan, using some of our investments to help pay down that loan, and then just spread that cost out over time. And again, Nathan could come up and speak a little bit more if the council has specific questions on financing.
Councilor Weber.
Before I start talking about financing, I just have a quick, I just need to understand what I'm looking at here. There's a grid or a
Yep, the spreadsheet.
explanation of costs here. And it looks like it's about 27 million, and we're talking about hopefully 12 million in a 6-year period.
Mhm.
Does that cover all of these items here, or are some of these?
Nearly. So what's not included off of that list is the elevators, is like the stairs aren't included.
Okay.
There's a few other minor things in there that were in the out years that weren't included, and that's in that efficiency of freeing up some of Mike's staff, and that budget is being able to those are kind of those manageable projects that if we got these big systems taken care of and modernized, it kind of takes a little bit of it frees them up to kind of start addressing some of these other, some of them, while look cosmetic, there are some structural things with the stairs. You could look outside at City Hall and we think we're due to have painting done and things like that. And so, but right now his staff doesn't have the luxury of that time to manage that.
Got it. Thanks for helping me understand that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think one thing we've discovered when you talk about that work is a lot of those projects, when Mike and his staff put those prices together, they're considering doing those projects as individual projects. I think the one benefit by doing what would be somewhat of a disruptive project, comprehensive project, is by combining all of the work. It's like, well, we're moving everybody out of a certain area so that we can strip it down, we can get into the ceiling, and it just makes it a lot more efficient for a contractor to get in there and do that work than trying to figure out how, okay, this year we're going to do the duct work and how do we shift people around and get duct work done in those spaces, versus doing a more comprehensive and combining a bunch of work together.
Right. And just one more follow-up. With costs continually rising, I mean, that's just going to continue to happen. So I assume that time is of the essence to get this kind of in the decision
Yeah.
process and letting you get moving forward with contractors and getting them in here and all that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think every day we get an estimate, it's never going to get cheaper. At least I haven't seen that. So the sooner you can get bids on these and get prices secured and equipment, because some of it is, some of this equipment, how long does it take to get it ordered, that sort of thing. So I would agree with that. It's never going to get cheaper. And it seems like I'm always nervous every time we're 6 months down the road looking at something new. I'm like, okay, I get a cost estimate today. It's kind of exciting, but it's a little nerve wracking because you're like, okay, how much more is it going to be up this time versus never seems to go down.
And also I'll add something else. We're also facing some regulatory issues. So we have, the elevators, like we spoke about, those in about 2 years, we're going to have to do. And those, we have the west and then the north elevator that I was notified by the state. They're not just going to pass. We can't just do like a quick retrofit. They're going to be a full rebuild. So that helps us strategize on how we do it. If we change out City Hall, some of the the elevators will get changed on their purpose. The other thing is the fire control panel. We've been giving grace on how many times they overlook some things. But once they added the city council chambers, CMO, the new library stuff, we're expanding that system. And so we're slowly falling behind on having a Sonatrol little pad that now isn't working for when we do inspections or a third party comes in and does the regulatory fire inspections, that we're running into it's going to be a hard stop sooner or later.
Counselor Stout.
I have a handful of what'll seem like a little bit disjointed questions, so forgive me. So just clarify something, and maybe I missed it. We talked about phasing. Can we go section by section with all the replacements, or do we have to? I know it's kind of like a web met together, but can we go like, quadrant A, quadrant B, or does it all have to be kind of done at once? I know costs continue to escalate, but I'm just kind of weighing those two things. Like, do we do all at once, or that's my first question.
I think when I put phasing in there, it was if the council wasn't comfortable with a project this size of like, do we go back and do we consider like what Mike has more? I think phasing, we would too, with the work presented for that 12 million, what we think we can get for under 12 million is our goal. It would be phased within City Hall, but all of that work would be done as one project.
Okay.
That would be the part we were talking that we would look forward to figuring out of how we keep continuity of service, moving folks around and getting the space and freeing that up for the contractor. But yeah, the goal would be to phase it that way. It's still going to be a long, disruptive project. There's no way around that, but it's like, how do we make sure that for the customers, for employees, that we have continuity of service?
Then just two other short things. We're not locked into any contract with any particular brand of HVAC system, are we? Especially when we're doing this.
Not at this point in time, no.
And then my last question is, actually, permit me two fast ones. We expect City Hall to be a durable facility for a good 30 more years at least. Yeah, it's a great building.
Those were kind of the questions I had
Yeah.
for council. That's kind of, when I was talking to the mayor and Councilor Weber about this, that's like one of the questions. Is this where City Hall's going to be? If that's the vision we see, it's like, well, then what do we need to do to invest in the building to see it continue as that civic center that we have?
But the bones are good, is really
Yeah,
kind of what I'm trying
Correct.
to.
Yes, we don't see structural issues with the building. We just have system issues.
Perfect. And my last question, I promise, is do you have any money at all for any additional consultants on this project? And the only reason I asked that and suggest that is my church just did a total HVAC reworking, and it was stunning. And the guy was a little bit of a crazy genius. He had also done all the HVAC work for Mackenzie Willamette. And not you have to use the guy, but I'm just saying, like, do you have any additional money for that? Because that could potentially shift the overall direction of the project even further, or have you already engaged a consultant to get this put together?
So where we're at, and this is kind of why we're here tonight, because this kind of scope change is beyond what I came to council and had got the contract approved about a year ago. What we were talking about was more of that, functional remodel, looking at our spaces. And then, like I said, as we dug, we found this building needs a lot more work than that. And just kind of putting paint on it and freshening it up isn't really going to solve the critical issues behind the scenes, and not going to solve the problem and keep City Hall functioning. That risk that is still there. And so we engaged an architect with sub-consultants, and that's where we've gotten to at this point and right now. That question is if council says, yes, we agree, we'll come back. We will come back in short order at a regular session to get those next steps approved. What's the financing look like? How do we get, but we have a contractor who's been working with our architect to kind of put the cost together, but we haven't gotten to the level really detailed design yet, because it's like, before we start spending more money on that design, I really need to know if we're moving that direction before we spend more money. And that's kind of where we got with this scope change. I didn't want to come and say, oh, we've done all the design work and spent all this money before we have that decision from the council.
And I think Councilor Stout, the way I looked at this was, if we said yes to this, we were effectively making the decision that we're going to be here for 30 years, which could be the right decision, but we want to at least know that kind of going into it. Councilor Moreau.
Apparently this would probably be done by one contractor, and they would do the phasing in coordination with the city, correct? Good. This is a good looking city hall. I've seen others around the state. They're pretty old. They're to keep them going. And they don't look good. But this one looks like a good city hall, and I'm sure it'll be beautiful for many years.
Other questions? So I looked over.
I know, but I was thinking, well, it's not really a question. I think, and I don't know if, are we down here to these questions? Is that what we're talking about? So yes to these things of it being a good looking city hall, but just to put it out there, what would be some reasons that we wouldn't? Right? So I'm curious as to if anybody has, like, why would we, what would be some reasons that this wouldn't remain City Hall?
I don't know that anybody's got a reason for it, but we got to walk into, this kind of investment eyes wide open. Before we get to the financing piece, I guess I have two questions. One is, so we're saying effectively we can value engineer ourselves into like $37 million of like total value by being just, for $12 million.
So right now, the estimate we have that we're working with, the list of work that I put in there, that we're getting the electrical, fire panels, lighting, HVAC system, roof, windows, we're at 13.8 million. We met with, right before when I was preparing for this and getting that estimate, Mike and I met with him. We think once we have a go ahead on a project and we start getting into detailed design and looking at, what would be really nice to have versus what's the most important thing to have, that we can get that. The goal is to get that down to 12 million or less. And so that's that laundry list of work. And I think the reason we're realizing some of that through this project and what we've gotten to with our consultant is because we're not taking like, oh, we're just going to do HVAC, and that's it. And we're trying to work within City Hall. It's like we're doing a comprehensive project, which is some guarantees for the contractor and that sort of thing. So there's some pricing efficiencies and cost efficiencies by doing one project. So that's what I think we're experiencing.
And, maybe this is a question for Nancy. What happens if the HVAC system catastrophically fails?
That's such a great question, Mayor, because I was going to raise my hand and say, what we're really bringing to you is an issue with an HVAC system that is currently on life support, basically. And I don't want to come to this council afterward and have our HVAC system fail and have it be an immediate and very expensive fix. I'd rather try to address the issue before we get to the catastrophic range. So what happens if it fails is that we would have to, depending on the degree, time of year, conditions, all of those factors, I would say worst case scenario is that City Hall would not be able to have people in it, and we may have to close it completely. We do know how to do that. We did that when there was stay-at-home orders during COVID. It's definitely not preferred, but we know how to do it. I would say that's the worst case scenario. And then, of course, anytime you have to purchase when you have that kind of immediacy, the pricing goes up because you have to, get things right away. Whereas this time we're trying to be deliberate in the decisions that we're making and how we're planning our space so that what we replace this antiquated system with is actually suitable for the space in a holistic way instead of kind of piecemealing our way through.
The other question that I had was, if I'm thinking about it from the public's perspective, when I look at this list of maintenance, is there a smaller version of this that is plausible, or is this the smallest amount of maintenance that we can do to effectively do this correctly?
I would say it's the smallest. It's probably the most efficient package that we could come up with. I think we might be getting a little smaller. That's why I say through detailed design, but it's not going to be like 50% less. I think where we've kind of gotten to with the system needs and what we're designing, and I appreciate Nancy talking about like the space, when we look at the space allocation and remodel for staff and what we call a remodel, is really looking at designing the interior of the remaining space so that what offices are created, what meeting rooms are created in that space. Is we're not in this place now where we're adding staff and now we need to add an office here, we need to add cubicles here. Is trying to get to that place where it's actually designed as an office usage space, the HVAC system set up to match that. So for the next 25 to 30 years, it's just routine maintenance instead of suddenly now we close off and cordon off a section of the building and that's going to mess up the HVAC system. I'm really like pushing the directors as we look at the space and that sort of thing, that we're providing space for smart growth, which means we have allocated for future offices. We're not going to walk in and ask Mike's group to suddenly build us new offices, 10 years from now. That's the goal, is that we're at a place where we have the right system designed for the staff and we have allocated space for growth.
So what happens if we just replace the HVAC system and don't reorganize City Hall?
Well, I think the reality is if we just do that, we'd still be tearing into all of the walls. I think the remodel or the rework of the space for staff is really now kind of that minor piece of the whole project. When we actually go through the costs and we're looking at the cost estimate in detail, that's not the expensive parts. The expensive parts are dealing with the electrical systems, dealing with the HVAC systems, fire suppression systems, those sorts of things.
Nancy.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I was trying to get to that. Maybe I didn't explain it well, which was we won't be able to achieve efficiencies just replacing like for like, because what we have now doesn't work for the way that City Hall is configured. Because you think about how long this is, since 1980 that we've had this, people move, there's offices that get built or shift, or a wall will come up, and when you don't reconfigure your zoning around that, that's where, you'll go to some parts of City Hall, it's freezing cold, it's burning hot, it's really inefficient now. And I've been nervous through the summer that the HVAC would hold out and the air conditioning wouldn't blow on us, and I'm going to be nervous in the winter to make sure the building can stay warm. So the zoning and the recalibration of where people are in City Hall is really about how do we make a space that is where we put people, where we can make the system itself more efficient. And that's where we go down from the 64 units to 20 some units.
So is it fair to think about it like if we just replace the system today without reconfiguring people, we're going to spend millions of dollars and get half the lifespan out of the system, right? That you're saying that to get the full lifespan out of the new HVAC system, we've got to reshuffle and reorganize part of City Hall.
That's what I'm saying, Mayor.
Yeah, okay. I think I got it. I think we're ready for you, Nate, because I think we're going to have, I don't think Jeff's going to let us off the hook without talking about financing. I notice how they both quickly tried to leave. So I think maybe start with like, what direction do we need to give from on financing? Or because if we're saying, hey, it looks okay, and you guys can do some more work, but when I read it, it sounded like we need to talk about, what our potential dollar.
So we've just had some side conversations regarding financing. We haven't put a lot of work into it, not knowing if there's an appetite for this project. So if there is, that's when we're going to start looking at this. And I think for starters, just deciding, what fund should be covering the cost of this. We've already done a remodel in the city manager's office, in the library, in legal. And so this group that it touches is mostly DPW. And I think the utility funds will be paying for probably the majority of the share of this project. So that's going to be one component that we're going to look at. And then the other is, do we want to access existing reserves, or do we want to look at financing this and then having that debt service spread out as part of the operational budgets of these funds over 5 to 10 years? And so I think we'd be inclined to bring back some options that we think make sense, and then let you consider those and choose the one that you would like us to pursue.
Okay. I think that would work. Right. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So bring us some options. All right, Jeff, what other direction do you need?
So I think the key to there is that there's an appetite for the council to move the project forward. So we can come back with that. It would be bringing back some financing options. The one thing that we'll be looking at first, because we're kind of like at a, I don't even want to put a percentage on it, but we're still in early detailed design when we kind of said we need to take pause and get more direction from council. So I think also would be coming back with some contract updates, things like that on that next step, so that we can engage our consultant in that detailed design, a full detailed design, and keep moving forward. Because our goal is if we can get to a financing option that the council agrees to, wants to move the project forward, that we can get contractors in here as soon as possible. And so with that, I'll be working with city attorney's office and Nathan on getting those contracts so I can get that moving too before as quickly as possible.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, the last one is the nuisance lien discussion.
Good evening, council and mayor. I was planning on walking around and handing out the photos before, thinking I may have to say, may I approach the bench, or I wasn't sure what the protocol was there. So I'm glad.
I think we got you covered.
I appreciate that. Good evening. I'm here today to brief you on our code enforcement collection efforts, specifically regarding nuisance liens, excuse me. This is an informational briefing to prepare you for a potential public hearing that I'd recommend for December 1st. So the issue before us is straightforward. We have 7 properties with over $355,000 in court-ordered fines that remain unpaid despite extensive collection efforts. Tonight, I'll explain what nuisance liens are and why we need them, and also the process moving forward. So first, let me clarify what we're talking about. So nuisance liens are different than abatement liens in that abatement liens recover costs that the city incurs through physically abating the nuisance violations. So the 4 abatements, or 4 recent abatements, have included demolition of a substandard house that was already fallen down and unable to be secured. cleaning up a large chronic nuisance property with odors and things like that in the back. And so there were contractors that came out and did that work that the city worked through either a voluntary compliance agreement or a court order to do so. Nuisance liens collect court-ordered fines that property owners already owed but haven't paid yet. So essentially, those are in collections at this time. So these fines that the Springfield Municipal Court has already imposed through a full judicial process. Property owners have had their day in court and were found in violation and ordered to pay penalties. These court orders remain unpaid and are currently with the collections agency, which has recovered nothing despite holding some of these cases anywhere from 18 months to 4 years. The nuisance lien gives us an additional mechanism to secure these debts against the properties themselves. So the problem here is, let me give you kind of some context. We have roughly 1.8 million in outstanding fines, some of which are in collections or otherwise, and those numbers fluctuate. And that's specific to code compliance fines. Some of those go way back before I started working here 9 years ago. Some of them are much more recent. And so the ones we're talking about today are specifically 7 properties that have over $350,000 in unpaid court fines. And these aren't minor violations. These are chronic nuisance properties that seriously impact the community. The photos in front of you show the properties in question. The violations include living in RVs on vacant lots, with garbage spilling onto adjacent properties, or changing properties. The RVs will change it onto a different property, or additional RVs will come on. Obstructing ADA access for months on end with moving boxes, other junk vehicles, that sort of thing. Dangerous buildings with repeated security feature or failures. They weren't able to or did not secure structures. And then industrial vehicles and operations, heavy equipment, repair and otherwise, and junk stored on residential lots. So these violations have been ongoing for years. One case in that packet goes back to July of 2020. Property owners here have received multiple citations, appeared in court, failed to appear in court, were found in violation, were ordered to pay fines. They've ignored those court orders, and our collections agency hasn't been too successful. So meanwhile, as this is occurring, our neighbors or their neighbors are continuing to suffer the impacts, and compliant property owners rightfully question why these property owners really face no real consequences. So the solution here is kind of the final piece of code compliance regarding the actual fines themselves. While we do have the ability in some cases to go and resolve violations or abate violations through a court order or attempt a voluntary compliance agreement, the properties in question here don't quite fit the bill there. They're either too expensive or unable to access whatever the violations are, or unable to determine that ownership. And so it makes it incredibly difficult to do the actual physical abatements. And I promise you I'll only quote one section of the code. So Springfield Municipal Code 5.640, which was adopted way back in 2001 under 5.624 or 25, more recently in April of this year as 5.640. Through that, we have the legal framework to place liens on properties specifically for these unpaid court fines. And here's why they're effective. So they attach to the property and not just the person. So instead of just having a bill floating out there in collections, these are attached to your property. They're valid for up to 10 years. So before or if these properties are sold or refinanced or change hands, they come due. And they have a strong deterrent effect. This is a pretty substantial move by the city, and it's not to be taken lightly. And so because of that, there are specific actions that these folks will see that, if you violate the code, in extremis. This is an action the city will take, and they work. Out of the past 4 abatement cases, 3 of them had turned into liens, and we've recovered 3 liens since then in the past 2 years. And this is again kind of in the growth period of code compliance, and so these were extreme cases that we were able to address with minimal staff. And they're also the industry standards. So Portland, Salem, Eugene, all impose not just abatement, but fines as well, code compliance fines through the lien process. And so this is also about equity here. Compliant property owners invest time and money to maintain their properties. So these 7 property owners have accumulated a large amount of fines while their neighbors do the right thing and invest in their property. And so without this effective collection mechanism, our code compliance system really loses our credibility here. And so I want to emphasize the extensive due process built into this. Code compliance staff or people with the city aren't able to impose these liens unilaterally. If the council agrees to a public hearing on December 1st, is kind of outlined, and that's not necessarily an arbitrary date, but it's certainly movable. The first step would be notice to those property owners explaining in detail what the fines are about, and then the specific procedures to follow to appeal that, and what their rights are. So that would hypothetically go out if the public hearing was December 1st. I'd send those letters out on Wednesday, October 15th, and then they'd have 30 days to do a couple of different things. They can appeal by written protest. They can come to the council hearing itself, or they can pay the fine. Another piece of that as well is this is a compliance tool that we use that if that lien is placed or if that threat is made, and they're able to come into compliance, we're more than happy to significantly reduce any of those fines. That's our ultimate goal here. We're not out just for the fines. We're really, really working towards that compliance piece. And so that the opportunity to object would end November 19th. The public hearing on December 1st would be held before the council. And that's where the property owners can either present their case or present any written objection. However, at this point, and this is important to understand, that the hearing is pretty limited in scope. So again, per section 5.640, council isn't reconsidering whether the violation existed or whether the fine was valid. That was already decided in court, and the appeal process is ended there. So your role here is to approve or deny placing the lien as a collection mechanism on the property in question. And then step 4 would be if I believe it's by resolution. If it's applied by resolution, then the lien would become effective on the city docket the following day. And again, the property owner would be notified directly of that. And so this layer is pretty significant protection there. There's due process built into it, and it's layered on top of the extensive procedural rights that were already afforded during the original municipal court proceedings. And so this is where the property owners could contest the violations. They could present evidence, cross-examine witnesses, and ultimately appeal any decision to municipal court. So this is well past that point. And so a couple fiscal and policy considerations here. So first, the impact here is we're talking about over $350,000 in court-ordered fines coming back to the city. And liens provide long-term security. This isn't us coming out in our current collection efforts. This is they're not going to go away. No one needs to call on them. They sit there until the property changes hands. And then there's also administrative costs that can be levied in as well under 5.640. So that's 10% of the total fine, which would effectively cover the cost of doing business that the city has already put into these cases. So when you look at this isn't a citation that the city we foot the bill for all those costs. So that's court fine or court fees. That's the code compliance officers out in the field, that sort of thing. And again, that is also something that we can negotiate as well. If we enter into a voluntary compliance agreement, traditionally the city has waived those administrative fees in each case. And feel free to, if you have a question, feel free, please.
Absolutely.
You want to go first?
Go on, yours first.
Thank you. Thank you for this and for this conversation. I have a comment and a couple of questions. So I appreciate this journey that we're on. And I know since you joined us and it's been since time that I've been on council. And so it's been great for me to see this process as we move through it. And I know one of these properties that I've been in meetings about, because it's in my ward and have often wondered, like, what are we going to do next? I think a couple of the things that I just want to ask about, and you kind of have touched on it. So just wanting to make sure that there's a very clear process that we move through so that this isn't something that we can be like, we're crabby at these people or whatever, that we can set up a clear process that we will build on as we move forward so that folks really understand that we've done due diligence, which I think we absolutely have because we don't have this process and some of these properties have been out of compliance for a really long time. The second thing is really, and I'm probably not alone with my colleagues up here, is that, this is one of the things that I get the most people showing up on my doorstep about, right? They're talking about the neighbor, and my spouse is at the top of that list, is talking about who's not mowing their lawns or who needs to do this or that. And so even though we have this lien, this doesn't ensure that the property is going to be cleaned up. So that's the thing that I'm sitting here thinking, that even though we do all of this stuff and the money eventually comes back, it doesn't necessarily improve things for the folks that are having to look at that in the short term. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I thought it'd be helpful for us to just talk about it in public because, there's the like, oh yeah, we know that they've been fined and there's a lien and all of these things, but we still have to look at that property.
You're not wrong, Counselor. I mean, it's one of those things. So this is kind of the next step, and one of the obstacles that we face as a program is resources and having those types of resources. And so when we've done the abatement projects before, those have not come out of an abatement fund. Those have come out of general fund. And so the plan here is that all of these funds will be transferred specifically to an abatement fund that is only geared towards resolving these violations. And so while it's not, a fix for next year, it does give us an operating budget to have those contractors on site or something along those lines. So we will be seeing efficiencies in the near future. We just hired another officer, and so I don't anticipate us being, out in the street or, anything like that, but we'll be able to really be much more effective, I think, with this abatement fund, but also with that second officer really working.
Councilor Mo.
This is a long question, so be prepared. What if they just walk away?
Typically that will then fall under taxes. And so it's at least a 3-year process there. We're still protected under the 10-year statute of the lien. So while we won't have an immediate resolution, we don't have one now. And so at least this will give us the potential to recover something when that property does change hands in order to do something about the next property that occurs.
Thank you.
Councilor Stout.
With a mechanics lien, I can foreclose on a property as long as I file my lien paperwork within, I think it's 90 days or something like that. But there's no foreclosure mechanism with the kind of lien process we're suggesting in this case, correct?
Certainly not through code enforcement.
Okay. And is there a parallel, is there anything you would want council to consider related to that or possible in relationship to that when we're talking about these projects that have been out for 18 months, was it, on collections?
Charlie, I can help with that a
Thanks.
little bit. So This type of lien actually could be foreclosed judicially, like with a lawsuit. So the city would have to file a lawsuit against the property and the property owner to foreclose the lien and receive the payment. That would be something that would need council approval, obviously, because it's a lawsuit. So we wouldn't enter into that lawsuit without telling you. But it's a different type of process than like a non-judicial foreclosure that you hear about for residential houses where it doesn't run through the courts. That would be an extreme, to do a judicial foreclosure, I would say would be a significant action. And not something that this is intended to have. The lien is not something it's intended to do. It's really an ability, if the property changes hands, to clear it. Once they want to clear that title, then the city can receive those funds back. So it's a possibility, but not something we would recommend.
Councilor Weber.
If I missed this and you already said so, forgive me, but what happens after the 10 years expires? Do we have an opportunity to go back and replace that or reinstate the lien, or it just drops off?
I think it drops off. I don't believe that you could like extend it for a further amount of time. The thing about municipal liens that's important is they have high priority. And so that's what's significant about municipal liens or this type of lien. But I think the 10-year limit is the 10-year limit. And if that's different, we'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Charlie, thanks for bringing this to us. I know this is probably the number one issue I hear from constituents about is issues around these types of properties. So thanks for being on it. All right. Thank you.
So is that direction then to move forward with all the properties?
I thought
Adopted.
I thought it was information only. Yes, go forward and do it.
Thank you, council.
Okay, thanks. We have a break.
Captain sign off.
All right, I'm losing control up here. I'm going to adjourn us. We will be back at CETA at 7 o'clock.